Hi there. In this video, I'll be introducing you to TextMesh Pro, which is basically a replacement for all the different text components found in Unity, whether it be GUI text, TextMesh, or even the new UI text component found in Unity 4.6. Now, TextMesh Pro is the ultimate text solution for Unity. It brings advanced text rendering capabilities to our favorite game engine, as well as greatly improved text layout and control. Now in this video, I'll be focusing mostly on the advanced text rendering capabilities of TextMesh Pro, and then in a subsequent video, I'll be focusing on the improved text layout and controls that TextMesh Pro brings. So let's begin. If we take a look at the current scene, all the text that is visible is done with TextMesh Pro. Now, focusing our attention on the TextMesh Pro logo itself, as you can see, this is some pretty fancy looking text that we've got there. Meaning if we look at the face of the text, we appear to have a texture on the face as well as an outline that's also textured. There's some beveling. We seem to have like a bump mapping on the face of the text. There's glow, meaning this looks really fancy. If I was to select one of the scene lights and move it around, as you can see, the lights are affecting the text itself. Meaning at this point, you're probably thinking, oh, wait a minute. This is probably either all baked ahead of time, meaning this is not real time, or the geometry involved per character has like a bazillion vertices per character and tons of triangles and the performance is going to be horrible. Well, let's actually take a closer look. If I'm to focus on the word pro and zoom in, you can see that the text remains super clean and super sharp at any zoom factor. Let's zoom back a little bit. We can see our nice bump mapping. We can see the face texture, the texture on the outside of the bevel, the outline and the beveling. We can see the nice glow here. But zooming back, if we take a look at the geometry, we can see that this is still 2 triangles or 1 quad per character. As a matter of fact, from a performance point of view, there is no additional performance overhead. As a matter of fact, TextMesh Pro will perform as good, if not better, than the standard text components in Unity. Now, is this all real time? Well, let's select the word Pro, delete it, and type it again. And as you can see, this is all real-time stuff. So how is this possible? Well, let's get rid of this scene and start with a much simpler scene and take a closer look. As you can see, I'm using Unity 4.6, and right now I have a canvas with 2 text objects. If I expand the canvas to reveal these text objects, how would we add a TextMesh Pro object? Well, it's pretty simple. We would go to Create, we would select UI, and instead of choosing the UI text component, we would choose the TextMesh Pro component. It's that simple. Now, focusing on these 2 text objects, if I was to zoom in, right now they look pretty good, but if I was to zoom in, you would see that one text object still looks really good, and the bottom one doesn't look so good anymore. So if we select the bottom text object, we will see that this is basically a UI text object from Unity 4.6, and Unity does use a bitmap font asset. And bitmap fonts, in order to render on screen, you basically have to add all the characters are added into a texture atlas, and the shape of each individual letter is basically defined by the various pixels. So as we zoom in, the amount of pixels is finite, and eventually we run out of pixels or resolution to display the font correctly. Now, by contrast, when you take a look at the TextMesh Pro object, which is at the top, the TextMesh Pro object uses a different technique to render the text, which is called sign distance field. Similar to a bitmap font asset, a sign distance field asset, we still add all the characters into a texture atlas. But instead of using pixels to represent the shape of the letters, we compute a distance from each of those pixels to a nearest edge of the letter itself. And since this distance is a constant, whether we look at it from far away or close up, these distances are constant, so we can always represent the shape of the letter accurately. This is a huge advantage because when you look at a bitmap font, if you want to render this text at different point sizes, you're going to have to generate or render all the different characters at different resolutions and pack them into a texture atlas. And Unity does do that at runtime using their dynamic font, but it does come at a performance cost. In the case of TextMesh Pro and using sign distance field, this font asset is static. It never changes, and it can render the text clearly and sharply at any point size or any resolution. So how do you create one of these font assets? Well, it's pretty simple. TextMesh Pro comes with a built-in font asset creator where you open the font asset creator. You would import in Unity a true type font or open type font as you would normally. You would then select this font and choose the various options that you would be interested in, including which character sets you'd like to have, or a custom range of characters, or characters from file, and then you would simply generate this font asset. Once it is done, you would save it and begin to use it. And here we can see a signed distance field font asset created in TextMesh Pro. Besides the fact that we now need only one single font asset to render this font type cleanly at any point size or resolution, as I'm showing here, there's another huge benefit to using TextMesh Pro. If we take a look at this bitmap font, what if you wanted to add a stroke or outline to this text, or maybe a shadow or beveling? Maybe you wanted to add some glow or a texture on the face of the text. Well, you would basically have to take this bitmap font asset and export the atlas into a tool like Photoshop to basically manipulate it, and you'd have to do that for all the different point sizes you were planning on using. But with TextMesh Pro, let's see what happens. Let's say we wanted to make this font a little bit thicker. Well, we can go to our material property panel here, and I can choose dilate to dilate or make the face of the text thicker or thinner. What if we said that we want to add an outline or a stroke? Well, let's go play with thickness here, and as you can see, I can add a stroke dynamically. How about a shadow? Well, let's expand the underlay panel. Let's enable underlay. Let's add an offset here a little bit. Let's add an offset below. Let's change the transparency of this shadow a little bit, just to show you again. And let's add some softness. Now, what I just did is basically we're still using the same font asset that we created, but I just tweaked the material properties. There is no difference between this plain font that we looked at, and if I hit undo, this one. The only difference between the two are material properties being modified. And with TextMesh Pro, you can duplicate materials. So if I like these properties, I can create a material duplicate, which I call a preset, and then you can simply drag and drop these material presets on your new objects. So with TextMesh Pro, it is one font asset per font type, and by font type I mean Arial, Impact, for example, or whatever TTF or open type font that you're using. And then for each of these font assets, you can create as many material presets as you want. So for example, we have this current font. Let's choose Arial Outline and drag it here. Now we can see that we added a subtle outline. How about the Arial Drop Shadow? Now it's got a shadow and an outline. Well, if I change my font to something like Impact, for example, this is the plain Impact. Let's navigate to different Impact, and let's choose one here like with a yellow glow. Now you can see that we fundamentally change the look of our text. Actually, the letters, since Impact is a very thick font, let's change character spacing here a little bit. I'll try to go slow with my mouse to add some extra character spacing. So as you can see here, now our font, we went from a plain white text to suddenly we have a cool texture on the face, we have a different texture on the edges, we can see some nice beveling, we can see the shadow. Let's actually make the shadow a little bit soft, like this. And we have some nice glow going on. Let's actually add a bump map on the face of our text. So I'm going to go to the bump map panel. It actually has some, but let's change the bump map to something more obvious, like to scratch metal. So here I can, let me remove it from the edge, and just, as you can see, if you look at the face of the text, now it's got way too much, but I can add some subtle bump mapping to give a cool texture feel to my text object. So again, all these changes are dynamic. So one font asset, and then you can have an unlimited number of looks and feel for your font. So going from a yellow glow to a green glow, see, it's just a different one. And swapping, if I hit undo, redo, we can go from one to the other, right? These are just material properties. Now, let's take a look at a different example here. Let's go back to our demo scenes, and let's load this metal example. Now in this scene, I'm using the surface shader, which basically means that scene lighting will be affecting the text object itself. So if I select one of my lights and move it around, you can see how the lights are affecting the text object itself, right? If we were to zoom in to one of the letters, let's take a look at how it looks. We can see some cool beveling here, kind of a metal frame around it, and it's using right now an inner bevel. So if I go to my bevel, let's remove the bump mapping from the edge. If we look at the beveling option, it's using inner bevel. If I change this to outer, so this is an outer bevel versus an inner bevel. If we look at the beveling, I can adjust, for example, where the offset of it is, like right on the edge, or move it around. I can adjust the width, which is how thick it is. So now you can see that I'm making a much thicker, let me do that. See, it's much thinner and thicker. The top of the bevel is kind of sharp. I can actually flatten that if I want. So now you can see it's almost like the top of the beveling was kind of stamped. Right now we've got some roundness going on. Let me make it sharp so you can see what's going on here. So there's all kinds of things you can do to the text. So another example is, what if I didn't want the current texture that's on the face of our text? So I can apply a texture on the face or apply a texture on the outside outline. Let's change our face texture for an image like this. Now, if we look at this text, we can see that there's an image on the face of the text, but it's mapped per character. What if we wanted this across the entire text object? Well, I can go to my UV mapping options here, and instead of horizontally mapping it per character, I can map it, for example, per line or per paragraph. So let's go per line, and vertically we also want per line. So now we can see that our texture spans across the entire text object. So let me hit undo a couple times just to go back to the text that we had to begin with, and I'll actually undo the beveling options, so that when I do my next demo, I don't, start with a messy looking object. Now, let's take a look at a different example here of what we can do. Here I've got a different text object, a different font type, with a much wider kind of soft shadow. We can see some beveling going on, which looks pretty cool. And then I have this texture mapped on the face of the text. Now, if we take a look here, we can see a new property which says UV offset and then line offset. If I put no line offset, you'll see that the texture is mapped the same way on each line of the text, right? It crests up here, it crests up here. And in this case, I want to add an offset. So now they're kind of offset from each other. Why did I do that? Well, that's because there's another feature here, UV speed. I can actually animate the UV of the text object. Let me switch back to game view, or I mean the scene view. And now you can see that the texture is rolling across each of the characters, which is kind of a neat feature that's made possible with TextMesh Pro. Now let's stop this. Let's take a look at another example here. I'm going to load this frozen scene. And let's focus on the object itself. Now, if you look at this object, again, different font type. Again, the bottom text is also done with TextMesh Pro, but it's got this weird shimmer on it. Well, let's enter play mode and see what's going to happen. Now it's switched to the game view, and now you can see this weird frost-like effect scrolling through the face of the text. And if I actually select the TextMesh Pro object, you can see that now I've got this little script called Environmental Map Animator, and this allows me to control the speed on the X, Y, and Z axis. And if I go to my environmental map, you'll see, and let me select the map and expand it and hit preview. So I'm using this texture, which is basically cycling on the face of the text object. So if I'm to go back to my text object, right now it says face color and outline. I can actually control how much is applied by changing the color. So if I make this darker, it kind of makes the effect on the face go away, right? White makes it 100% applied. an outline color, I can remove it from the edge or add it back on the edge of the font. So I can control where this environmental map is being applied. Now the next thing that's kind of cool is, let me actually I won't zoom in. Let's go to our bump mapping. I've also got a bump map being applied. So if I was to remove the bump mapping itself, you'll see that now we can see the texture cleanly running through the text. But when you apply bump mapping on top of it, it sort of adds like a deformation on it. So it ripples it through the bump map, and that's how we can get this weird frosty, icy effect going on. Okay? Next, let's go back to our demo scenes, and I'll show one more, which is this Halloween example that I did. So here again, we've got a plain, let me reset the text. So this is just a font I got from somewhere on the internet. This is what the font looks like, right? Just plain looking text. But in TextMesh Pro, as I tweak the material properties, let me hit undo a couple times. If I tweak the material properties, in this case, I don't even have a texture. I just went with a orange color. I added a subtle bump map on it. It's actually it's not even visible. So let me bump it up. You can see here taking effect. But all I did is added some beveling and glow. And here you can actually control the glow position, like the offset. Like I can move the glow inside the text object itself. Now blue on orange obviously doesn't look too good. So let's pick something like this, make it brighter, make it kind of sharper. As you can see, I can fundamentally change the effect that we've got. So right now I moved the glow inside. I can move it back outside. Now orange and orange obviously doesn't look as good anymore. So let's change that color back to a cool kind of green. Whatever, I can't remember. I think I had yellow. Character spacing. See the two letter P's are on top of each other. Let's just go back here to character spacing and increase this a little bit like this. And now let's see what I was going to show you. So in TextMesh Pro, you do have access to all the different characters that are generated in the mesh. And with this information, you can create a simple script, like I created a vertex animation script. And with this little script, if I enter play mode, you'll see that what it does is it adds, it modifies the position of each character to add sort of a jitter effect. And on the second line, it basically takes the same character information and changes the vertex color per character. And this, gives you a nice example of some of the things you can do with TextMesh Pro. So this will conclude it for our demo of TextMesh Pro in terms of our advanced text rendering capabilities. In the next video, I'm going to go over the text layout features of TextMesh Pro. Basically, it's great that we can make text look amazing, but it's really important as well that we give you the right control over your text in terms of alignment, kerning, and so on and so forth. So thank you for watching this demonstration. Should you have any questions or comments, please feel free to post. Thank you for watching.